Government's role under the two V's of education are completely different as well. If your view of education is that you should be a moral, self-governing person, that limits government's role also. Their position then is to support your liberty and protect your property from being infringed on. If, on the other hand, the education is about getting the correct skills, why do you need the correct skills? Well, so I can earn a living. Why do you need to earn a living? Well, society benefits from that. Oh, well, government's got to get in here and tell you what society is going to find beneficial. And it's got to tell you what skills. It's got to tell you how much skills. It's got to control what is taught as skills, how it's taught as skills. It's all going to be managed, quantified, tracked, dealt with. Two very different results from one small difference that is rarely asked. What is the point of education? What is it? What is it supposed to accomplish? No, we need standards. We got STEM, and we've got to... Standards for what? The first view of education is what the country was founded through. The second view of education, skills, is what got its first active traction on the national level during the Civil War. The Morrill Act for land-grant colleges. Most people, yeah, wonderful, good stuff. Push education out to the world. Yes, it did. That view, the bill itself was vetoed twice by President Buchanan. He said, this is just, you cannot do this. It was finally passed as a war measure, which should give you a perspective when you're considering sending your kids to school. It is designed to educate out the rebelliousness. That's what originally was pushed for. And to get people with skills that could do things and not cause trouble. First instance of government grants being used to influence, to get into the internal measures of states and even individuals' thoughts. This is the first time you'll find that in the country. It's about 1863. It's also the first time we got a Department of Education. That was when it was created. Not in the 70s, that's when it got promoted to a cabinet position. 1860. And it's been doing its wonderful work ever since. At the same time, in the same measure, we've got the Department of Agriculture. They were supposed to be twined together, that the education will give the skills to do the new farming styles and will be able to compete with the Southerners or whoever it was. Soon after that, and a lot of the better college presidents at the time fought against this. There were that people actually brought their pitchforks. College buildings were burned down for those colleges that were trying to push this. Don't even confirm it was the guy promoting it. But it was passed, by the way, Morrill was a Republican, progressive Republican. And when it brought through there, very soon after, we had to have teachers' colleges. Then they got to start controlling what the teachers' colleges were teaching. How they're teaching it, where they're tracking it. How do you know they're teaching it? Whoa, we got money in this, we got to be good. We got control. Individual rights and sovereignty are inseparable. When you allow them to be separated, you don't have either one of them anymore. Individual rights reflect the reality of human nature. Each person is sovereign in his own right. Rights have to be held like daggers in the face of people who want to infringe upon them. You've got to assert them. You've got to pull them out like you're pulling out a handgun. You had no right to do that. Constitutional representative republic, if you can keep it. The Constitution defines a republic. It does not define a democracy. There's a huge difference, and there's a reason why we started referring to ourselves as a democracy, late 1800s, early 1900s. Because it definitely wasn't a republic. There are things you can't do in one that you can do in the other. Republic, assuming it's properly based, I think ours is a pretty good start, promotes decentralization. It promotes the individual living their own life. And it defines what can not be done by people. Tell them what they can. A democracy promotes centralization. Hey, we've got a whole bunch of people. The majority says we want to get this. That rules. If it's wrong, it doesn't matter. You have enough people saying they want it. Republic promotes bottom-up power. Each person is able to control their lives and what they're doing to the extent that makes sense. Representative republic gives a greater voice to individuals as well. Before the 17th Amendment, you'll say, well, people didn't have the right to vote for the senators. Well, they knew their representatives. They could go to their representative. Their state representative knew their senator. They had a big hand in electing the senator. No longer the case. When you have democracy, the individual's voice is no more loud than the majority. You cannot be heard. Looks good. People want this. Fantastic. Enjoy your health. Common Core is the latest in the long string of top-down measures. It views the purpose of education as delivering useful skills. It views people as human capital to be managed and spent as benefits the greater good. Which handily becomes anything that whoever got the most votes can say it is. It's driven by unelected, non-representative, quasi-governmental sources, private organizations. It doesn't work. It's not compatible with federalism. It's not compatible with rights. It's not compatible with our form of government. And that's very well known. We've had a few go-arounds with folks who representing in our textbooks or democracy. No, or not. History of Common Core standards. It comprises more of a history than most suspect. I hinted at some of it here. A couple key points. When they're talking about the standards, designed to be robust and relevant to the real world, reflecting knowledge and skills that our young people need for success in college and careers. Doing things, not being. Surprisingly to them, some folks have not quite bought into educational standards as being that which ensures students have skills. Look at that. Standards help teachers ensure their students. Help teachers. That means telling teachers what they're going to teach, how they're going to teach it, how you're going to track it being taught. Very different thing. A lot of people have had some other answers for that. What I came across last night. Common Core standards are a setup for national standardized tests. Tests that can evaluate complex thought, can't avoid cultural bias, can't measure nonverbal learning, can't predict anything of consequence, and waste boatloads of money. You have 10 of these points, and every single one's like, wham. That is a hint that we should keep in mind as well. Diane Ravitch laid into these as well. She's a educational historian, kind of has been somewhat on both sides of the fence, but I think she finally came around as being, oh, this is really bad. How can anyone predict what they'll do? Standards that are going to be helpful for the 21st century. What do you suppose people said standards were for the 1980s and the 1970s? I'll bet you computer programming didn't play that big of a part. We don't know. We have no clue. You have to be able to teach people to understand and think so that they can acquire the skills as they need them when they need them. Remove that, then they're dependent on whoever can provide them some skills. Is there anything new about this? No. Where did it come from? Here. May not recognize exactly what is being talked about here, but a couple quotes. First one, this was someone who got really upset at what they saw that a professor had written. It was in a publicly published document. The professor had said, I advocate sabotage. I'm not going to attempt to justify sabotage on any moral ground. If it's necessary, that's its moral justification. Anyone remember a couple years ago when we had University of UMSL and Kansas City? And we had a kind of a union thug here and an avowed communist there. That's not it. But they pretty much said the exact same thing. One of them said, we need radicals, we want confiscation, we got to put this out. Well, this person read this, and they said, what do you think of that? You American mothers and fathers who are sending your boys and girls to American colleges. How does it press you, you businessmen who own property? I know your first answer, you're going to say, the professor should be fired. This person looked into it I said, what if you're convinced that professors, ex-professors, college graduates, representatives of leading educational institutions in America are all preaching the same doctrine? Now what are you going to do? This guy tried to raise a ruckus, tried to tell people that there are problems. It wasn't William Ayers. It wasn't Gilgim. It wasn't Ansel. It wasn't in 2000. It wasn't in the 1980s. It wasn't in the 1960s. It wasn't even in the 1950s. This was said in 1920. That's how long we've been at it. Because our grandparents and great-grandparents didn't act along with protesting and saying things were bad. We've got the situation we have today. What are our grandkids going to say? Will they even know about it? That was 1920. When I started digging into this, going back through how education has kind of transformed across the years, this is not a new thing. This guy here, Elwood P. Cumberland, cool 1920s kind of name. He wrote something very publicly, very popularly. He has a larger hand in forming the school systems than John Dewey did. He wrote, each year the child is coming to belong more to the state and less to the parent. And he was darn thrilled about that. That was the point. That was what he was doing. This guy had a huge hand in designing our schools, our textbooks, and why they were taught. He said all kinds of fun things, like things that people are doing today have to be changed into obligations. That the school is going to be the central part of society. The key point, where they point out much antiquated material adapted largely to the needs of society that has preceded us will doubtless need to be eliminated. Antiquated material. Homer, Plutarch, Virgil, Cicero, things which formed this country. The last part of this quote, probably everyone has heard. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. The first part is more important. It says, progress, far from consisting in change, depends on retentiveness. It means what is important has to stay important. When change is absolute, there remains no being to improve, no direction is set for possible improvement. And when experience is not retained, as among savages, infancy is perpetual. Change. Be the change you can believe in. Where did it come from and why? Believe it or not, some of it came from our founders. Dr. Rush, Noah Webster, the guy who started the dictionary. What they were after was a way of getting education. They were impressed with science, they were impressed with how efficient and the wonderful things it was bringing. They wanted to make it more quantifiable, more scientific-ish. That was the point. They forgot Aristotle, that you only demand precision from that which admits of precision. You don't ask a geometer to give you a rhetoric's answer, and vice versa. And I just got rhetoric. Bottom line, the change that we need to be bringing, that we need to be doing, has got to come from you. You have to get involved. You have to assert your rights. You have to demand that things are done properly. And as a couple of folks have pointed out today, and you'll hear tonight, what they're doing is clearly not legal. It's misrepresented. It's sold as lies. What they think is their strength is their weakness. And if you ask, if you question, if you deliver those questions and publicize them and talk to your friends and neighbors, their thing falls down like a house of cards. Quickly, embarrassingly. Ask Krishna Castro. Find out. We've got a lot of information coming. And I got through a quarter of what I was going to get.